Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading into haunted houses for a collection of truly terrifying, scary stories. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I live in a 50-year-old apartment building that has always been a hotspot for strange paranormal activity. Over the years, the stories and encounters have piled up, leaving many residents, including myself, with more questions than answers. One of the earliest and saddest ghost stories here goes back to when I was around 4 or 5. It was Christmas, and the neighbors were hosting a lunch. Among the guests was a young man struggling deeply with his parents' divorce and sinking into depression. During the gathering, he excused himself, saying he needed to use the bathroom, but instead, he locked himself inside one of the bathrooms. No one could stop him. That day, I actually saw him fall. His life ended in that very house. The whole building still carries the weight of that man's sorrow. My neighbor who was there never forgot how she missed the signs, how she didn't realize the pain he was hiding. A few months later, I was sitting in my small studio apartment watching Digimon while my mum and grandma cooked dinner in the kitchen nearby. Suddenly, I thought I heard a female voice calling my name. I muted the TV, wanting to hear clearly if my mum was calling me. But instead of voices, I heard a faint humming, soft and eerie nearby. At first, I thought it might be a character on the show humming, but the TV was muted, right? Then I realized the humming wasn't coming from the TV speakers. It was coming from about half a meter away, where there was nothing but empty space. I froze in fear and ran to the kitchen, trembling. My mum checked the TV and swore nothing was wrong. Fast forward 10 years, and the weirdness escalated. The building's security guards started reporting sightings of a white, ghostly figure appearing from the parking lot. This figure would stand silently in front of passers-by, sometimes sitting, other times lifting off the ground and floating towards the sky. The guards said it seemed almost desperate, like it was trying to get people's attention. This phenomenon was caught on security cameras, footage that was later lost when the system was upgraded. The guards also told stories of late-night disturbances, loud screams piercing the silence, chilling whistling drifting through the parking lot. They'd check every corner, but found no kids or pranksters, and the whistling, strange as it was, seemed to move from place to place, sometimes seeming to ascend into the sky on windless evenings. Many residents, including myself, have heard our names called out in disembodied male and female voices. In the basement, a dark, shadowy figure has appeared multiple times, terrifying those who saw it. And I myself have seen a small girl of maybe 4 to 7 years old running down the hallway. She wears a white dress and has long, straight black hair. Oddly enough, no child that age has ever perished in our building, making her presence all the more unsettling. Could she have been from before the edifice was constructed? But the most relentless haunting happened a few years ago, lasting for a full 2 months. Every single night, between exactly 3:10 and 3:43 a.m., my dog would wake me up barking frantically at the front door. He was shaking, terrified, and refused to move or calm down. I was overwhelmed. High school work, sleep deprivation, and now this constant night terror? I called the security guard, hoping maybe the neighbor had come home drunk or something. He denied any disturbance, but promised to keep an eye out. At first, I thought perhaps it was just my imagination, or my dog reacting to some unknown noise. But then my dad and I noticed something chilling. Just before the dog started barking, the automatic lights on the floors would flicker, as if someone was walking up the stairs, but the lights always stopped right at our door. When we opened the door and searched, there was no one, and nothing. The dogs stayed rooted in the doorway, trembling and barking at something invisible. For 6 weeks, this nightmare repeated every night. I couldn't let him sleep in my room because even then the barking wouldn't stop. I was losing my mind. I screamed into the darkness, begged whatever was haunting us to leave me and my dog alone, and prayed for the restless spirit to finally find peace. And eventually it stopped. As for my sister, she claims she once saw the devil himself lurking in the dark corners of the building. I'm more inclined to chalk that up to sleep paralysis. But in a place like this, who really knows what's lurking in the shadows? My grandmother lives in an old house in the English countryside. It's large, damp, and quiet, in a way only old houses can be. The place has been in our family for generations, and during holidays or major family events we'd all gather there. Dozens of us, kids tearing through the garden, adults in the kitchen, the usual loud hum of a large family reunion. But even as a child, I noticed something strange about that house. There was an unspoken rule among us kids to not wander the house alone, especially not at night, and if you had to go down a hallway, to not look too closely into any of the rooms, as you might see something looking back. There was one hallway in particular, the narrow corridor that connected the front of the house to the kitchen in the back. It doubled as a laundry area and an ancient washer and a few racks of drying clothes. In the middle of that hallway was a patch of shadow that would just not go away. It stayed dark. We nicknamed it the dead spot. No matter how bright it was outside, that patch of floor always seemed to be in shadow. We didn't talk about it because none of us stopped in the hallway. It was somewhere you ran through. You looked straight ahead and prayed your eyes didn't flick to the side. I never saw anything as a kid, but every time I passed through, I had that creeping sense that if I turned my head at the wrong moment, I'd see something watching me. I only found out years later what used to be there. My dad told me that he'd built a small bathroom in that hallway for my grandparents, but it was never used. They said it wasn't theirs, that something already lived there. I hadn't even realized it was a room. For me, it was just a stretch of wall for over 20 years. 18 years passed. My family eventually moved out of the UK, and the old house sat mostly empty, except for my uncle who stayed on as my grandmother's caretaker. We only returned when there were major family events, like that year. My dad went back to help restore parts of the house. The rest of us stayed elsewhere, as it was too cluttered and dusty for the kids. A few days into the trip, my dad called me and said he hadn't been sleeping. One night he woke up at around 3 a.m. and saw someone sitting on the edge of his dresser, watching him. He told himself it was just a trick of the dark, but the feeling didn't leave him. When he told my uncle didn't even flinch. "Yeah, it's probably still there. I've seen it too." Then he told my dad more. Things he never told anyone. He said he'd seen a little girl running down the upstairs hallway, always the same, dark hair, pale, and running straight into the wall at the bottom of the stairs. That wall is where the front door used to be. He said he'd seen a man's face, massive and distorted, hovering in the living room like it had been pressed through the fabric of the air itself. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Occasional whispers in the house when it was empty, except for him and our frail grandmother. He told my dad he smudged the house every week just to keep it bearable, but that week he'd forgotten. When we visited that trip, I could feel it the second we stepped inside, like a thickness in the air. My dad kept glancing at us nervously and didn't want anyone alone in any room for too long. At one point, my uncle was showing us attic renovations. We each took turns peeking our heads through the narrow hatch, and when it was my turn, I climbed the ladder and poked my head through, and then I froze. I didn't see anything knock directly, but I felt it, something behind me. I didn't need to see it to know. It was crouched behind my head, watching. Something inside me screamed to not turn around and that it wants me, and the hairs on my arms stood up. My throat closed and I couldn't even blink. I climbed down the ladder slowly, trying to look normal, but my sister noticed something was off. Later she told me that while we were in my grandma's room, she'd felt it in the corner, watching us, angry. We cut our visit short that day. We were all tense, jumpy and drained, but my dad stayed behind. He said he didn't sleep well for the rest of the trip. He said there was something in that house, and it knew when you were alone, and that's when it went for you. It was my first year of college, Sandy Point, Maine, a tiny town close to Bucksport. I used to go visit my parents on the weekend because I stayed in the dorms at school. As a reference to where the house was, there was this creepy little motel on a hill and on the other side of the road. You had to make a sharp right onto their road and then another sharp right onto their driveway. The house was really old. It was painted yellow and had apple trees in the yard. First of all, let me say that Sandy Point was one of the creepiest towns I had ever been in. The feeling was way off. It didn't matter if it was day or night, you never saw anyone. I used to go to walks at different times of the day. I never saw anyone. I always found that odd. So, to the house. You come up the steps into the house and immediately enter the dining room. All the floors were very old wood. Straight ahead was the kitchen, to the right were the stairs going upstairs, and the living room was also to the right. The door to the dirt floor basement was at the kitchen. So myself and my mum never liked going in the basement, it always felt off. It felt like someone was watching you the whole time. I personally never liked the living room, it didn't feel right. The only person who seemed okay with it was my dad. Okay, so at night I would always put my clothes out for the next day, all together on a chair in my room. When I would wake up the next day, they would be placed all over the house and I had to look for everything. I would hear footsteps in the hallway at night. I would hear them come up the steps and then come down the hallway past my room towards my parents, then back towards mine, then stop. I would usually say hello, because I'm someone who's usually up super late at night anyway, then hear nothing, only to wake up in the morning and have to go on a treasure hunt for my clothes. My mum was always creeped out by that place. What sealed the deal for me about something going on is when it came for my dad. This happened while I was at school during the week. He is someone who is 100% skeptical. He told me he stayed home one day because he wasn't feeling well. He had stayed in bed and had awoken to someone coming up the stairs outside. He heard the door open and someone walk in. Thinking it was my mum, who was home from work, he called out, but got no reply. That's when he heard footsteps in the dining room. At this point, he was out of bed. He called my mum's name again. Nothing. Just as he came to the top of the stairs, he saw a man walk into the living room. My dad is someone who doesn't mess around with anything like breaking and entering, so he got his gun from their bedroom and proceeded down the stairs, telling whoever they were that they'd better leave or be shot. No one answered. So he did a sweep of the whole house. He looked everywhere, all the rooms, the basement, outside, everything. There was no one. The man he saw was in overalls and had boots on. He only saw the man's back as he entered the living room. They moved to Bangor soon after, which made me happy. I have other stories from there, but maybe for another time. During my teenage years, I had multiple experiences in 2 house shares I lived in during university. The first house was a standard terraced property that had a basement. Obviously, we explored the basement area the first day we moved in, where we found this matchstick model of the house that had been put together, as well as old newspaper clippings from the 70s. We thought nothing of this, but the activity exploded. Shadow figures. The house layout meant you walked in and had 2 rooms off the corridor. As you went down the corridor, there was a kitchen, and through the kitchen was the living room. You could see the living room from the front door. We all saw figures move in that living room all the time. The door to the basement would open itself, and the light would switch on. All our rooms locked. My housemates in the room downstairs would come home to find all of her drawers open on a regular basis. All of the kitchen cabinets would randomly open too. 3 of us had upstairs rooms. We would hear loud footsteps and people running almost every single night, and we always thought it was each other, until after a few months we asked each other and realized it was none of us. There would also be occasions where something would bang my radiator on the other side of the room. It would be so loud it would wake me up from deep sleep. In my second year, our group stayed together, but these experiences were enough. So we got the hell out of that house and moved to another thinking it would be better. But it wasn't. It got worse. In this house, we began hearing footsteps on the upstairs hallway just like before. There was an incident in the upstairs bathroom where one night I was on the toilet and heard someone try the lock handle and giggling. I shouted thinking it was my housemates playing a prank, but the handle rattled louder and more aggressively. I shot up, opened the door, and it was pitch black, and everyone was fast asleep. I had a shelf in my bedroom, and in the night things would fall off randomly. I checked the fittings, and this was dead level. Even if you slammed the doors and windows, the items didn't budge. This just kept happening. Then one night in bed, I'm just falling asleep and hear a loud, very audible exhale in my ear, so loud I feel the breath. I quickly rolled over and saw this human-like figure right by my bed, which quickly disappeared. My housemates also heard voices. Downstairs, they used to hear chattering in the room at night. They would think it was us and text everyone in the group chat, asking everyone to keep it down. But it never would be any of us. We would all either be out or asleep in bed, which made the whole thing even creepier. And if we'd go down to check, there'd never be anyone. We would also see shadows dart around the living room. There was one evening when we were all watching TV together and we saw this figure dart down the hallway towards the garden. I couldn't sit or stand in that room without my back basically being against a wall. And there were also the taps in the downstairs bathroom. But one of the creepier things were the taps. In the downstairs bathroom, upstairs bathroom and kitchen, they would just turn on randomly. I finally moved out in my 3rd year to another property, and everything stopped. A few of the group had placement years, so we split up. One of my housemates decided to stay on that house, and new people moved in with her. I went to visit, but the house still gave me the creeps. The man who took my room had the exact same experience as me. Everyone else also had their own. I often think about how many people who'd lived in there since, and whether they might have had a similar experience to us. My wife, who was 36, and myself bought our home just over 3 years ago. It's a modest, 30-year house in a quiet neighborhood. Not remote, not particularly old, and definitely not the kind of place you'd expect strange things to happen in. But last night, my wife told me something that genuinely scared me. She waited 3 years to tell me, not because she was hiding something or being dramatic, just the opposite. She's the most grounded person I know. She's rational to a fault, and if she hears a weird creak, she'll look for plumbing or structural explanations before even thinking about ghosts. So when she started shaking and crying while talking to me, I knew something was really wrong. She told me she'd been hearing things in the house almost since the beginning, but she kept brushing it off. At first it was the attic. She'd hear footsteps or something heavy being dragged or dropped. Nothing consistent, just here and there. She said it started so subtly and infrequently that she convinced herself it was the house settling or raccoons on the roof. But lately, the sounds have been happening more often and they've changed. She now hears noises in other parts of the house as well. Clear thumps on the stairs, just 2 or 3 hard deliberate steps as if someone was wanting to be noticed but not seen. She's heard them when she's sitting alone in the living room, be it day or night, it doesn't seem to matter. And then there's the sigh. She said she's heard it several times now, a loud, unmistakable exhale, always nearby. It's the sort of sigh a person will make if they sit down after a long day, and she described it as being just behind her, maybe a meter or two away, and always when she's alone. She never hears the sound when I'm home or awake, only when I'm asleep or when I'm gone. That's the part that hit me hardest. She told me she started noticing the pattern early on. If I was at work late or if she stayed up watching TV after I'd gone to bed, then it would start. The footsteps, the sigh, the attic noise. But never when I'm around. When she told me this, she was sitting on the edge of bed, her hands clenched in her lap. She was shaking a little and crying quietly, and I just sat there stunned. I've never experienced anything like this in this house, not a sound. She asked me if I thought she was crazy. I told her no, that I believed her. She's not someone who gets spooked easily. If anything, she's always been the one to calm me down when I get anxious or overthink, but this time it was different. It's like she'd been carrying this fear around quietly for years, and only now, it had gotten too loud to just ignore. There's one other thing too, and perhaps it means nothing, but I've had this recurring nightmare for a number of years now. Every few months I have this same dream, that I'm being chased by something dark and heavy. It's not a monster or a person, just this overwhelming dark energy that wants to get me or my loved ones. In the dream, I try to fight it off by reciting religious texts, prayers, whatever comes to mind, but I can't get the words out. It's like something is physically stopping me from speaking. I always wake up just as it's about to catch me, gasping, terrified, and soaked in sweat. I never connected to anything until now. Maybe it's just stress, maybe it's just a dream. But when I told my wife about it after our talks, she went still. She didn't say anything for a long time and just held my hand. She asked me not to leave her alone in the house for a while. And then came the update. Last night I had to work late. I was gone almost until 2 a.m. and she stayed home watching TV on the couch in the living room. The back of the couch faces a wall, and on the other side of that wall is the hallway that leads to the stairs and front door. At some point, she heard a sound coming from the hallway. Not just a bump or a creak, but a rhythmic, almost moaning and grunting sound, repeating over and over, low and guttural. She said it lasted for minutes, long enough that she had time to consider going to check, but she didn't. She was scared, yes, but she also said something that stuck with me. I didn't want to give it attention. I felt like that would only feed it. So she sat still. She didn't pause the TV nor turn around, she simply waited, and eventually the sound stopped. She didn't hear anything else after that. I got home about a half hour later and she was still awake, curled up with her back against the wall. She looked exhausted. When she told me what happened, I asked if she thought to record it, but she shook her head. She didn't even think of it at the time. It was like her brain was in survival mode. We both don't know what to make of it. I'm not sure if the dream and the noise are connected. I don't know why this thing, whatever it is, only shows itself when I'm not around or unconscious. I keep trying to think of a logical explanation. I've checked the attic, the crawl space, the vents. I even stayed up late in the living room one night while pretending to be asleep on the couch, but nothing happened. It only comes out when she's alone and vulnerable. I've read that certain entities are drawn to vulnerable states, fear, grief, isolation, but she's not any of those things. She's happy, we're happy. I mean, we've had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing traumatic, but still something feels off. I'm thinking about setting up an audio or motion sensor, maybe even a security camera inside, just to see if we can catch anything. I'll let you guys know if anything escalates. And if anyone out there has any experience like this, something that hides from one person and shows itself only when another is gone, I'd appreciate hearing about it. Whatever this thing is, it learnt our patterns fast. and it knows when we're not watching. When I first moved into my current house, I was around 20. This was back in 2005. The house itself wasn't creepy at all on the surface, just one of those generic suburban homes built sometime in the late 80s. Slightly outdated, but nothing out the ordinary. We didn't get a bad vibe or anything while walking in, and honestly, the biggest complaint I first had was just how damn ugly our front door was. It was this faded, piss yellow color with a brass handle that had seen better days, maybe in the 70s. The worst part though, the locking mechanism was completely broken. You could spin the doorknob in either direction, just round and round, and it wouldn't actually open the door. It felt like something out of a slapstick cartoon. We didn't have the money or tools at the time to fully replace it, so we just took the broken mechanism out and left it as a pull-push kind of situation. If you wanted to come in or out, you had to physically pull or open or shove it shut. It was janky as hell, but it worked. Anyway, one night I was getting ready to head upstairs when something caught my eye. The doorknob was spinning. And I don't mean twitching slightly like something settling or the wind blowing. This was spinning deliberately and continuously, like someone was trying to open the door from the other side. Except that wasn't possible. We had removed the mechanism, and the handle was completely free spinning. There was no way it could move unless someone was physically turning it. I figured it had to be one of my parents or my brother playing around, so I pulled the door open. But no one was there. I remember just standing there for a moment confused. The porch light was on and the yard was empty. Not a car, not a person, not even a breeze. I shook it off and closed the door. I'd barely turned around to go back up the stairs when it happened again. The doorknob started spinning, same as before, steady, controlled, like someone trying to get in. I opened it again, but there was still nothing. This time I just stood there staring at it, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. My brain was mid-process when something slammed into the door from the outside with insane force. It didn't just bang open, it ripped off the hinges. The entire door came flying inward like it had been drop-kicked by a linebacker. The edge of it caught me directly in the face, smashing my head against the corner of the hallway, and I blacked out cold. I woke up in hospital with a severe concussion and a deep gash on my scalp that needed stitches. When my parents asked what happened, I lied and told them I slipped while trying to close the door and hit my head. I knew they wouldn't believe what really happened. Hell, I barely believed it myself. We had to replace the entire frame, door and everything. Still have the new one to this day, and nothing like that has happened since. But I've never been able to explain what did happen that night. Let's fast forward a few years. I was about 12, and my young brother and I were pulling an all-nighter in the office, basically a spare room in our house with a computer and a couch. It was around 3 a.m., and everyone else was asleep and we were watching dumb YouTube videos. That's when we heard ding ding, a bell. Not just any bell, but a goddamn tricycle bell. You know, the little metal ones that kids twist with their thumb? That distinct, cheerful ding that, let me tell you, is creepy as hell when you hear it in a silent house in the middle of the night. We froze, looked at each other wide-eyed. The office was in the back of the house, and the sound had come from somewhere near the kitchen. We were the only ones awake. Naturally, we did what any dumb kid would do. We grabbed flashlights and searched the house, every room, every closet, under beds, nothing. We tried to laugh it off, but we struggled to sleep that night. And the next night it happened again. But this time I was alone in the office, scrolling through YouTube. My brother had gone to bed, and it was the same exact bell sound, but this time closer, sounding like it was coming from the hallway just outside the office. I damn near jumped out of my skin, grabbed the only thing I had near me, which was a heavy glass cup, and crept through the house like some kind of under-equipped video game character. I was sweating and trying not to make a sound, and when I reached the kitchen I stopped dead in my tracks. Because there, slowly rolling across the floor, was my old tricycle. The same one I used to ride when I was about 8, It was red with the little white seat and the chrome bell on the handlebars. I swear we sold it at a garage sale before we even moved here. It just rolled across the floor. It was like someone gave it a light push, and it just moved. But there was no one there, no sound, and no explanation for how it got here. And yes, it rang the bell. It wasn't in my head, I heard it twice, same as the night before. We still have the damn thing. No one knows where it came from or how it got back. It's just here, sitting in the garage. No one touched it. A couple of years ago, I finally told my mum everything. I expected her to laugh or say I imagined it. But then she told me something. She'd had an experience with that front door too. Same exact thing. Knob spinning, nothing on the other side. She said she noped out fast and didn't open it again. That was years ago and she never brought it up. Then she and my uncle told me about the other weird things they'd experienced. Not just in our house, but going way back. Turns out my mum's ex was Native American, and she used to mess around at burial grounds with him when she was younger. She didn't go into detail, but it was clear she had some serious paranormal baggage. Stuff would follow her, or maybe attach itself, whatever it was. She didn't like talking about it. But once she started, more and more stories came out. Some that took place in the house. I don't know what it was about this place, maybe something came with us, maybe something was already here. But after the tricycle incident, after the door tried to take my head off, I don't need any more convincing. In 2014, a friend of mine's mum lived in Williamsburg. She had bought a really old house and was complaining of hearing noises and strange experiences within it. She said in the attic she could hear a child's laughter at all hours of the night, and when she would throw an inflatable beach ball up there, it would be kicked back down. She also said that there was one room in the house that had a mirror in it, and always felt 10 to 20 degrees colder. So one night, my friend and I decided to do some so-called ghost hunting. We just took one of those old cameras that took pictures, and then a small image would pop up on the screen. We went to the base of the attic and tried the beach ball. It did come down, but we didn't hear any laughter. Looking at the slope of the house, there's no way the ball would roll towards the stairs. It would roll the other way, so that was odd. We then went to the cold room. It indeed had a mirror and nothing else in it. No light, no table, no nothing, and it did feel extremely cold. We took about 20 pictures in the dark, no flash, and we didn't see anything on the images at the time, and concluded the night after about 40 minutes in the room. The next day, my friend said he turned on the camera to review the pictures, and he sent me one. It was the first picture that popped up, and when I saw it, I noticed that in the middle of the dark room there was a blurry, shadowy shape. It kind of looked like a figure sitting or crouching. Around it are these weird glowing spots that almost looked like little flickering flames or candles on a tiny table. Some people say they see a dog's face in there too. Honestly gave me chills when I saw it. Really creepy, especially knowing the room felt freezing cold and only had that old mirror. To me, it looked like a demon with some sort of burning effigy. Some people say they see a dog of some kind. Ever since I turned 9, I've always had weird feelings and experiences in the house I live in with my family. I've seen a few shadow figures, and 2 were very detailed. I've now seen them a lot over the last 19 years living at home. One is about 5 years old. I'd say in a very white, misty silhouette, with short curly hair and an old-fashioned long dress. She seems innocent and hasn't caused any disturbance or problems in the family. Both my sister and I have seen her. A couple of my friends who are female, as well as my sister and mum's friends, have seen the silhouette, but haven't seen her very clearly, not like us. None of the men in the house have seen her. Not even the ones who've stayed over and are constantly around. Kinda weird, right? The other figure is a very tall, broad man with just a top hat who stares. My ex-boyfriend saw him one time when he was staying over. My brother, at the time, was away, and my ex was walking towards my room and said, "Hey, John." I said, "What? Did you say hi to me?" He said, "No, I'm saying hi to John." I told him he was away, and my ex freaked out. He explained what I'd been seeing to a T, except the top hat. The hallway to my room was dark at the time too, so he only saw the figure. So beside my ex, I've been the only one to see him. I saw him first when I was 8, then again when I was 12, and now that I'm 21. I'll still see him every now and then during the year. But there were 2 years where I didn't see him at all. So now you have a bit of backstory, let's dive in. Yesterday morning, my mum woke me up to tell me about a dream she had. She was lying flat on her back and couldn't see any sort of spirit or ghost on top of her, but she felt like she was being pressed down on her chest and arms. She was absolutely terrified. She was fully aware of her surroundings and just felt like something that wasn't welcome or nice was trying to get to her. She couldn't speak, being completely stunned, and when she finally could, she yelled out, "No, go away, you're not welcome." My dad had to wake her up over 6 times that night because she kept having this dream encounter. It was different every time, but the dream kept repeating. That's when things got weird. When my brother was living at home a few years ago, his girlfriend was staying over, and she had full-on sleep paralysis. She was terrified and woke up crying, really frightened and scared. She was sleeping on the outer part of the bed, and my brother was next to the wall. She saw this little girl with curly hair and a long dress, but with a demented face. She said the girl was just looking over the side of the bed staring at her. She didn't say anything, but she felt like the girl was upset and angry, not welcoming. She felt like it was a negative energy. She was fully conscious of what was happening around her. She tried to move to wake up my brother, but she was choking and making weird noises. Eventually, the noises woke my brother up, and he woke her up. That morning, I was talking to my mum outside the kitchen and told her about how I saw the little girl again in the kitchen the night before. It was late. Everyone was asleep. I was having a cheeky snack, and I looked at her for a little bit and she looked at me. And then I blinked and she was gone. As I'm telling my mum this, my brother and his girlfriend walk out and hear the conversation, and they tell us what happened. It's weird because, for all of the females in the house, we have never felt any negative energy from this little girl. We were thinking it is possible that she was jealous that my brother had a girl in his room, I don't know. So after Mum told me about her dream yesterday morning, I was like, huh, that's weird, but also freaking scary. So the day goes on, and I go to bed that night. All night I had similar experiences as my mum, full-on sleep paralysis. That felt like it went on for hours. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the energy coming from my closet. But in the dream, I couldn't see into the closet like I normally can in the middle of the night. It was completely dark. I was convinced something was in there watching me. I tried not to look at it, but it was like my eyes were forced to stare at it the whole time. Then eventually my focus shifted to the end of the bed, and it felt like something was towering over it. I was shaking my head back and forth, but I had so much pressure on the rest of my body I was so scared. I kept closing my eyes and shaking my head, hoping it would stop and that I'd wake up and realize it was just a dream. I did that for what felt like hours until I finally actually woke up and didn't go back to sleep. I was terrified. I've had other experiences where I had sleep paralysis and felt like my hair was being tugged slightly, or felt hands on my hands or other parts of my body, as well as legs and feet. But I've never had a sleep paralysis as intense as that night. The house I live in is at least 40 plus years old. It still looks nice, not super old. I've tried to do research on the area, but I haven't been able to find anything on the area or even the town I live in. I have to say, I'm not a true believer in Jesus or God, but I definitely believe there's something more after death. I believe in the paranormal, but I've never encountered something I think is demonic or angelic. But I've never gone out seeking that kind of validation of the realm. I do, however, believe there are malevolent entities and believe in attachment, but it's always a battle in my head. So I guess my question is, Is there anyone out there that's had a similar experience with family and friends? What have you done since? Have you just ignored it and it hasn't happened again? Or have you laid down boundaries, set intentions, and done cleansings? And if you're experiencing things like this, what's your point of view when it comes to belief? I've watched and listened to a lot of paranormal things over the last 7 years. I'm really interested in it, but I've only ever had encounters at home. I'd love your thoughts, advice, and comments. This took place in the greater city of Brisbane in the state of Queensland, Australia in the early 2000s. I will preface this by saying, until I heard this account from people close to me, I thought the paranormal and or supernatural could possibly be real, but still needed convincing. After all of this came out, I'm 100% a believer. This is not my story, but this is how it was told to me by my best friend. My friend Wayne, who at the time was also still my brother-in-law. I've known Wayne since I was 19 and I'm 50 now, and we served in the military together for a significant length of time. I trusted him with my life at that time. I would have literally walked through fire for that man, and I've known my father-in-law since I was 20. I first met him while staying at his place in Sydney with Wayne. During one of our first military leave periods in the mid-90s, I had never had any real reason to doubt his integrity, ever. They're definitely not perfect people and could be called unflattering things, but liar isn't one of them. Wayne left the military to join the Queensland Police Force in early 2001, and because he was technically living in Brisbane during his application, he wasn't entitled to a barracks room at the QLD Police Academy in the suburb of Oxley. However, one of his classmates, Jody, owned a house in the suburb of Inala and offered up a spare room if he wanted to stay there for the duration of their recruit course. Inala is pretty close to Oxley, and Wayne, being the poster boy for perennial tight asses, thought, jackpot, free/cheap accommodation for the whole course. When he got there, he said it was an unremarkable, semi-high-set Queenslander-style house. It was old and a little run down, but had the required features of roof, floor and wall, good enough to crash in for the next 9 months. Jody said she had only recently purchased it for a steal from a deceased estate, which is something that happens every day, not an uncommon occurrence at all. Now here is where things start to go a little pear-shaped. Wayne said he always felt a little uneasy around the house. What odd is exactly I can't be sure, as Wayne's description wasn't forthcoming, but it mainly happened whenever he was alone in the house. He couldn't quite put his finger on it initially, but it continued to bother him. To add to the intrigue of the story, Jody had a small Chihuahua-type dog who Wayne said spent the majority of its waking hours hiding underneath Jody's bed, quivering in fear. In fear of what, I hear you say? Well, it seems the former owner of the house, a little old lady, wasn't quite ready to hand over all the keys to Jody on settlement. Now I immediately thought of the opening scene of the original Ghostbusters movie with the librarian ghost in the basement. Seems my initial thoughts weren't too far from the truth, except it hadn't morphed into a massive scary monster with outstretched arms and big rotten teeth just yet. Wayne repeatedly saw this little old lady moving around freely, but only when he was alone in the house. It was also quite obvious the dog could see it too. Now, Wayne hadn't known Jody all that long, just to waltz up to her and say, "Oh, by the way, you have a little old lady roaming in your house." So he bided his time and tried to spend as little time as possible in the house, especially if he'd be alone. On one occasion, one of Wayne and Jody's classmates came over briefly while Wayne quickly grabbed his touch footy bongos and used the facilities. The classmate, a bloke, sat in the lounge room waiting. Once Wayne had finished and rejoined him in the lounge, his colleague said, "You didn't say anyone else lived here too. Who's the little old woman?" Wayne immediately felt all the blood drain from his face and motioned with his head for his colleague to follow him out the house, out into the middle of the street. Wayne believed he needed to be off the property to discuss anything related, and he proceeded to say That wasn't a little old lady he saw walking down the hallway, but the ghost of the previous owner, who just happened to be a little old lady. This particular incident helped convince Wade that only males could see the little free roaming vapor. Even the dog was male. Wayne finally pulled Jody aside one night and asked her if she knew the full history of the house and previous owner, to which she replied, "Not really." Wayne pushed, "Did she die there?" Jody wasn't sure, but in his blossoming police intuition, he thought Jody was lying and not giving him the full story. So he just asked straight up, "Is the place known to be haunted?" Jody laughed and asked if he was feeling okay, because what he was saying sounded like nonsense to her. "No, the house isn't haunted," he asked her. "Have you ever seen a little old lady just cruising around the house a few feet above the floor?" No. Good night, Wayne." Now granted, none of this is particularly exciting on its own, I know. But apparently as time went on, Wayne's personal interaction with the previous owner escalated. He saw her more frequently, particularly in his bedroom, which he believed must have been her room. She even started moving small items around while he was asleep. As the police recruit course was coming to an end, one of the final items given to them as recruits were the blue and white checkered hat bands that goes on the traditional police visor cap. Apparently it needs to be prepared in some particular way, stretched before it gets put on the actual parade hat. Being an old house, Wayne had no built-in closets, just a huge, old, antique wooden double-doored wardrobe in his room. After preparing the checkered cap band in the required manner, Wayne placed it on top of the wardrobe next to his special parade cap. Part of the band was protruding just over the doors, as it was the patent leather visor of the cap. The next few days sort of blurred a little for Wayne and Jody, as the realization there were soon going to be coppers had them buzzing. A few days out from their march out parade, the father-in-law arrived from Sydney, excited and proud to watch Wayne duly become an officer and a member of the QLD 5th. There was another spare room in the house, and Jody said, "Please stay here instead of paying for a hotel room." Thing is, Wayne hadn't really told anyone other than the colleague who visited that the house still had its former resident floating around. After his first night in the house, the father-in-law looked a little out of sorts at breakfast next morning, and Wayne asked if everything was all right. Wayne could tell the old man was definitely not right, and asked him to come outside into the middle of the street. "Hey Dad, what happened? Did you see something last night?" The father-in-law proceeded to tell him that during the night, he had been awoken by something strange right by his cheek. It felt like something or someone was brushing against his face. When he opened his eyes, lo and behold, there was our favorite free-roaming phantom leaning over him, but ever so gently brushing his cheek with the back of her fingers. And I kid you not, actual physical contact. The father-in-law stayed frozen in place, too afraid to move, never once daring to close his eyes. Wayne explained the situation, and his dad looked at him incredulously. "Are you for real, mate? Thanks for warning me." As the day ticked by slowly, the father-in-law talked himself into believing he must have imagined things. Wayne was clearly just taking the piss and winding him up in a well-executed but supernatural prank. Because of all the theatrical fun of the morning, Wayne actually failed to notice that his prized checkered cap band was missing from its prime position next to the parade cap on top of the wardrobe. Vanished, never to be seen again. The three of them turned the house upside down looking for the cap band, and it was never found. Ever. Jody's cap and band was still there unmolested. The little old lady obviously liked Wayne's more, so she kept it for herself. Wayne had to beg for another one and prepare it for the march out parade the very next morning. I'm not entirely sure why Wayne and the father-in-law decided it would be a good idea to spend another night in that house, but they attempted it. It became very clear that she had chosen to go ballistic on two of them during the night, which ended up with both fully grown men laying in the same bed, petrified with the lights on. I can't remember with enough detail exactly what happened, other than it was really bad, but both Wayne and the father-in-law agreed it was time to get the hell out of there. They grabbed their stuff and drove to Brisbane City and stayed at the serviced apartment where Wayne's mum, also from Sydney, was staying for the parade weekend. They both happily slept on the floor. Wayne marched out as a QLD copper the next day and never stayed in that house again. All of this came out around 2007, when Wayne, his wife, and the father-in-law were over celebrating the birth of our first child. One of my wife's work colleagues and her husband were also there. Somehow the subject of the supernatural came up. The husband of my wife's colleague announced that he was fully on into that sort of thing and actually used to go doing ghost tours through the old Boggo Road jail at Dutton Park and other haunted spots around Brisbane. He said he and his mother had links to the spiritual world and some other crazy stuff. I'll never forget it. He leaned forward and looked down the table at Wayne, and the father-in-law said, "Why don't you tell him what happened to the pair of you?" They looked at each other, and Wayne told the story. The father-in-law chimed in with his own chapter. My wife and I sat there listening in complete disbelief. This was coming from two people I trusted wholeheartedly, and we were gobsmacked. There were other incidents they described to us, but I can't remember them in enough detail to tell the story accurately and give it the punch it deserves. To this day, I believe everything they told us. The father-in-law even demonstrated to my wife how gently she had caressed his cheek that night. Wayne and my wife were raised Catholic, Holy Communion, all the white robe stuff, and when Wayne left home to join the military, he was literally a walking, talking advertisement for atheism in every capacity. He was a complete rat bag shagger and generally a drunken ass. After this clearly life-changing experience, Wayne is now a devout practicing Christian. That's because he now knows there is something out there after death. I didn't put that together for quite a few years, but it's pretty evident. When I was 10 years old, I lived in an apartment, number 304. This was in Seoul, South Korea, until age 12. Which meant, in apartments in Korea, I lived on the 3rd floor and 4th house from the left. I had a dream one night that I was playing skipping rope in front of the apartment with other children on a sunny day, and a strange man in his mid to late 20s approached me and asked where my mum was. I had a weird sensation and a gut feeling that I shouldn't tell him where she was. So I lied and pointed over the hill and said that's where she was. He left and travelled in the direction I pointed. I saw a vision of him entering a house of a shaman. The shaman scolded him. She started scolding, saying, "How dare you," etc. And I saw her yelling at him, but I couldn't make out exactly what was being said, because I was too young. But she seemed furious that he was looking for her. I couldn't see his facial expression properly, but I felt a sensation of madness arising within him, especially because I had given him false information. Suddenly everything turned dark. The sun was gone, the children I was playing with, and I was left completely alone in the pit of night in front of our apartment within a second. I got scared, so decided to go home. I tried to go into the main front entrance, and a phantom appeared and shut the door on me. I managed to push. There were ghosts walking and floating around the ground floor of the apartment complex. It almost felt like I was in a different realm. I managed to swallow my fear and headed up the stairs. 1 floor up, the sign said level 1. 2 floors up, it said level 2. And then 3 floors up, level 2 again. I thought the phantoms were trying to trick me. I smirked and thought, I'm not stupid. So I walked into the hallway of what I thought was the 3rd floor where I lived. All the number plates on the front of the doors were random numbers I'd never seen, so I used my wit and counted from left to right. I opened the door, and a kind of funeral was happening within my house. My mum had passed away. She was there, but they said she was gone. I woke up from that dream, and it was one I never forgot. A few months after, Dad announced that we were moving. I was so excited. I had been wanting to move for so long. We moved across one of the apartments right in front of our old apartment, level 12, first house, 1201. I was shocked because I never forgot that dream. 2 years later, my parents divorced. Fights between my parents got a lot more violent and hostile over the 2 years. Dad cheated, Mum as well. Dad moved out shortly after the divorce, and I moved to Australia to live. I visited Korea every once in a while, and could never go to the bathroom with the doors open, as I always felt eyes watching me from the gap of the door. I also found out Mum felt the same. Mum ended up making friends with a shaman who started hanging out with my mum in this house. This is when I was in high school. This shaman lady said there was a youngish male in his mid-20s who was always standing in the corner watching my mum. He had a crush on her and was obsessed with ruining all male relationships that Mum would develop while living in this house. Years on, I got older and shared my story with my sister, who also told me she had a similar dream when she was younger. The ghosts were chasing our family, and we ran into a house numbered 1201. The young stranger in my dream looking for Mum, was he the ghost calling for her to that house? Now, I know why he was getting scolded by the shaman lady in the dream. The old lady I thought was the shaman. Could she have been our ancestor scolding him for wanting her? Anyway, I've seen things, experienced others, but this is the youngest memory I have of something supernatural. My home was built in a forest, surrounded by nature, which is exactly how I liked it, where the silence was only interrupted by the sound of the wind, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of animals. During my time here, I've seen many strange things, some of which I have no explanation for. During my walks, I've sometimes come across people who were supposedly lost. I always try and help them. Other times, people just seem to be wandering, trying to aimlessly find a secluded spot to take their precious life. As well as other uncomfortable things, like couples who go to a corner and assume that they're somewhere very remote, which obviously they're not. But one thing that I've always felt a bit strange about are the objects. You see, there's a stream that runs through the ravine in my backyard, and it would occasionally carry strange items, rocks that were unusual in color, that have no business being in this part of the world. Random objects like shoes, bottles, old toys, even books with their pages soaked and unreadable. Why would anyone be leaving these objects in the woods for the creek to slowly carry them down to my home? That's when strange things started happening within my home. Personal items would vanish without explanation. Deodorant, socks, tampons, little things I normally wouldn't pay much attention to. But then one day my firewood axe disappeared. I searched everywhere, convinced I had misplaced it, only to find it later on the headboard of my bed. I lived alone. No one had been inside my house, and yet my axe was placed there, deliberately, almost mockingly. And the lights in the sky, they weren't airplanes or satellites. Sometimes I would observe them moving erratically. Other times they hovered in complete silence before vanishing. But the strangest experience of all came when I left the forest, when I moved to the city. I thought things would change. I moved into an apartment complex on the 4th floor. It was a small place, enough for one person. I had never had roommates, never needed them. I worked night shift, meaning I was only home during the day, sleeping when I could. And then every single day at exactly 4 p.m., I would hear the window in the kitchen slide open, and a soft click as the latch unhooked, followed by the unmistakable chime of the wind ornament I had hanging there. But that wasn't the worst part. There were no footsteps, no signs of movement, but I would always hear the doorknob turning, the one that led to the hallway and the stairs, as if something entered through the window, passed silently through my living room, and exited through the front door. I never saw it. I never dared to check. I lasted 3 months in that apartment, 3 long, sleepless months, listening to that sound every day, knowing I was supposed to be alone until I finally had enough. I packed my things, left the city behind, and returned to the forest once more, where the strangeness was at least familiar, and somehow I felt safer. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed tonight's tour of the haunted houses, and if you did, please let me know down below to get some feedback. I would also like to extend a huge thank you, as always, to the people's names who you can see on screen. These are my members and patrons who, for signing up, get some extra exclusive perks. For example, if you want to sign up this week, you get 3 true Alone at Night scary stories that you can enjoy before anyone else, as well as other cool perks. So if you want to find out more, that's where you need to go. But that's it from me. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.